Good day, everyone. Welcome to my talk, Who Broke the Build? Using Kuttl to Improve End-to-End Testing and Release Faster. Have you ever heard this word, Who Broke the Build in your teams? Have you ever seen your manager asking, Who broke the build? On a lighter note, and the developers would say, I don't know who has actually broken the build. It may be me, but let me check and find and probably fix it for you, for our team. A little introduction about me. I'm Ram Mohan Rao Chuka, Senior Software Engineer R&D JFrog India. I'm passionate about open source and loves playing table tennis. Let us quickly walk through today's agenda. So, no one wants to be responsible for breaking the build, but what can you as a developer to avoid being the bad guy? How can project lead enable their teams to reduce the occurrence of broken builds? Is a quick summary of my talk. And probably I would like to walk through about the development and ideal development environment. And in talking to our teams, we discovered that many developers aren't running sufficient integration and end-to-end testing in their local environments because it's too difficult to set up and administer and test environments in an efficient way. That's why we decided to rethink our end-to-end local testing in hopes of cutting down a few headaches and valuable time wasted. So we've discovered a tool called Kuttl. I would probably walk through a demo as well, how to install and how to run end-to-end testing and with a quick demo. And I will also give a quick summary of what we learned today. Okay, let's get started. An ideal development environment would look like a single click setup. Say a new developer joins a team and setting up a environment is really a pain. I've seen developers in my previous ventures where developers would look at a wiki page and probably copy some of the instructions and do the setup instructions. It might probably take a couple of days to have a working setup for you. But instead, if you could have a single click setup of your entire development platform, it would be easier for you. And more importantly, you would be able to work on a feature, develop it locally, and test it as well. And more importantly, we would like that environment to be same as a production environment. So how does an automation helps in setting up a development environment? So generally, as I've previously said, following a manual instructions would be little painful for developers, and using automation, it can be completely easy to set up, which would also mean instead of probably hours, you can probably set up the entire dev environment in a few minutes. No manual steps implies error free and also a quick and reload of testing as well. And more importantly, as I said, dev environment should be same as production environment. Take an example where a production issue occurs and you would like to reproduce the same issue on your dev environment. So you should be probably spin up an environment as quickly as possible to reproduce and probably fix that issue as well. So let's try to analyze a problem that we have. Say, for example, I'm working on a feature development on a new feature. I get the requirements and I work on a design and probably work on that feature development. Once my development is done, I would write some unit test on my feature development as I usually do. And I write those unit tests and commits the code and probably raise a pull request or a merge request, right? So in our day-to-day environments, most probably these end-to-end tests would run on a remote CI/CD server, and it might take few hours, probably days as well, in terms of executing those steps. So let's take a scenario where I raise a pull request, okay, and since these end-to-end tests are performed on a remote CI/CD server, say a test fail, an end-to-end test would fail. So what would developer do? Ideally, it would take for him a while to understand why it failed, looking at the remote CI/CD server, and then try to reproduce the same thing locally and try to fix that issue. You can see this round trip of trying to fix an issue where to eventually have all successful end-to-end tests are successful is a painful point for a developer. So is there any solution for this? So we at JFrog evaluated few options in terms of how can we run these end-to-end tests locally. So you can see here, a developer writes the code, writes some unit tests. These are completely locally. He runs these unit tests. If something fails, he fixes them and tries to raise a pull request. Generally, I've seen most of these remote CI/CD server runs on a remote server. These end-to-end tests runs on a remote server. And if something fails, the turnaround time is huge in terms of merging and fixing an issue. So we at JFrog evaluated few frameworks, and fortunately, we were able to find a tool called Kuttl. And connecting Kuttl to our CI build has empowered our developers to easily configure a development environment very similar to our final test environment without needing to become a CI admin ourselves. Okay. So what we have done to replicate this remote CI/CD servers on a local. So we have used a tool called Kuttl. Okay. So instead of running these remote end-to-end test, use local end-to-end test using Kuttl. In our case, instead of locally committing, then pushing it, you would only commit your local changes, run these tests locally. If something breaks, you can fix them, amend those commits. So instead of pushing it to a remote CI/CD server, if test fails, you can probably commit it and fix those issues using a git amend. And this reduces a round trip and saves a lot of time for us. At least it saved a lot of time for us. So what we have done is, instead of running these remotes end-to-end test, we have brought them under equivalent to unit test where they run parallelly and everything is locally. You don't need to have an internet connection to run these tests as well, which would mean you are actually saving a lot of time. Okay. So as part of this discovery, we discovered a tool called Kuttl. Kuttl is a Kubernetes test tool. It is primarily used for testing operators. It is a CNCF approved or CNCF graduated tool. It was mainly developed as part of Kudo Builder for testing those operators. However, it can test any Kubernetes objects. It's very simple, YAML based. You don't need to learn a new language. Either you are a Java developer or a Go developer. It's simply YAML based configuration, and it accelerates the ability to create end-to-end environments for testing your code actually. So to get started, and if you are a Mac user, you can use brew install Kuttl CLI directly now. Or if you are a Linux user, you can use kubectl crew install Kuttl. Crew is a packet manager. And if you are a Go developer, and these two things are for CLI. And if you are a Go developer, if you want to integrate Kuttl into your APIs, you can probably do that using go get github.com Kudo Builder Kuttl. You can include it as part of their GUI code as well. Okay. So Kuttl is for an application developer who wants to, or an application admin who wants to automate the creation of new Kubernetes clusters. And if you want to test your applications on multiple versions of Kubernetes, and if you are a developer who wants to quickly test without writing much of your application code. Okay. So Kuttl has three main configurations. One is test suite and a test step and a test assertion. Okay. So this is a sample test suite that I've shown it to you. You can see here Kuttl is a Kuttl uses and it's a CRD, Kubernetes resource, custom resource definition. And you can see the kind is a test suite and the API version is Kuttl dev v1 beta 1. Okay. And you can see here kind start is equals to false, which would mean by default, if you set it to true, in my demo, I would probably highlight by setting it to true so that it uses a kind cluster to run locally. Or if you want to execute your test on a Kubernetes cluster that you already have without needing to run those tests locally, you can do that as well. So for that, set the kind as false. The name, it can be any name. For this probably demo, I would probably give you an example of installing an application and then to verify whether that application works or not. Okay. First thing is the test suite. Next is a test step. This is also a CRD where you can see the API version is Kuttl dev v1 beta 1 and the kind is a test step. As I've said, it has three main blocks. One is test suite, test step, and a test assertion. And Kuttl uses YAML based declarative approach where it tests the final state using an assertion of a declarative YAML. Okay. I would provide you with an example as well. You can see here I'm running trying to install JFrog Artifactory using a simple Helm command over here. Next is a test assertion step. So I'm trying to install an Artifactory and then do an assertion on top of it. So what I would do is, since Artifactory is a stateful set application, I would like to add an assertion to check whether the install of my application is successful by checking the ready replicas over here. Okay. So the final structure would look like I have a demo application where I would like to run my end-to-end test. I have two tests, okay, trying to install two tests and to see how Kuttl can be used to run these tests. So Kuttl test.yaml is the test suite where you define the prerequisite steps to have these tests setup run. Okay. Let me quickly walk through a demo. How do you use Kuttl to run end-to-end test locally? Okay, so what I've done is let me walk through the code first. So I have a demo application. I have a end-to-end test that I have configured, and Kuttl test.yaml is this configuration file. This is a CRD, and I'm demoing it for SUSECon 2025. And you can see I've added the pre-configuration commands that I need to have a Helm repository to access my application. So I have two tests. One is the default test and another non-split test. So what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to install JFrog Artifactory OSS version. Okay. And let me do a quickly word wrapper on this. I'm trying to install JFrog Artifactory this version with this predefined Artifactory split enabled. So I have two ways to install Artifactory. One is with a split mode and a non-split mode. So in this demo, I would be demoing a split mode and a non-split mode as well. Let me do a quick word wrapper on this. You can see one is non-split, other is a split mode. So let me quickly walk through the demo now. Okay, so I've just done a tree command over here. I have this setup ready. What I'm trying to do is I'm just trying to run these tests using Kuttl. I've already installed Kuttl using brew install. Then I'm trying to run these end-to-end tests locally. It's a simple command, kubectl Kuttl test. So what it does is it tries to create a kind cluster. You can see over here, I've set kind start is equals to true. So I'm using a Rancher desktop to have the local kind cluster running on it using Docker. So it is trying to create a kind cluster here. Let me do a quick export of this kube configuration so that I can access this cluster locally. You can see here, I've exported a kube configure file and I'm trying to access this cluster using a tool, open source tool called K9s. I would probably explain that little later. But so you can see here, Kuttl has started running on a local kind cluster. It is trying to set the, you can see here, it's trying to set the pre-configuration steps using the suite, and it has detected two tests. One is default and a non-split. This uses a very similar structure of somebody who is familiar with a tool called Flyway. Flyway is a tool used for database migration. Kuttl uses a similar sequential steps where you define the tests in a sequential order. And you can see it has detected two tests and it is running two tests. So what it does is Kuttl automates the creation of namespaces. It has created two namespaces, Kuttl test 1 and Kuttl test n. You can see here it has created two namespaces. I'm trying to access this cluster using K9s, an open source tool. You can see here one is on a non-split mode and another is on a split mode. So this is way of running or installing Artifactory in two modes. And it would probably take you can see the entire logs has been printed, how the install setup. So it tries to install Artifactory using a split mode and a non-split mode. And it will post install, it will try to do an assertion based on the assertion steps that we have added and verify the install step is successful. Okay. While it takes some time, let's go back to the documentation of Kuttl. It might take few minutes. We would come back over here. Okay. So the references that I have for Kuttl is Kuttl Dev Docs. This is an open source tool, CNCF graduated product. And you can refer to this GitHub page where you have the Kuttl source code and the binaries. And there is a dedicated Slack channel for Kuttl called Kudo. It's part, as I initially told, it's part of the Kudo builder. So the names are just Kudo Slack channel. And there is an open source tool that I've used called K9s. This is more like graphically viewing this Kubernetes cluster. In my case, it's locally, but you can probably use this tool to fetch a kube config of your remote Kubernetes cluster as well. So let me go back to the documentation around, see how Kuttl is used. Okay. As I've said, it's kuttl.dev. You can use brew install Kuttl CLI and you can verify the version as well. Okay. So let's dig deep into what Kuttl is, how this can be used with an API. As I said, it can be used in CLI as a CLI tool, as well as a plugin, as well as an API integration as well. There are a few examples around how this Kuttl can be done. You can probably look through this. And there is an assertion formats. How can you define failures? Say, for example, if you want to detect a failure and if you can catch that, you can also do that using an assertion step as well. There are a few tricks and tips around how. So if you are using a local kind cluster, you can also use load these built-in images where kind would actually support that as well, so that you don't need to download these images as well every time. It's more like the caching that kind provides. In my example, I haven't enabled that, so that it's for the first time users to just try it out as well. And if you are an experienced guy who want to actually use a caching around downloading these Docker images, you can see here kind node cache is equals to, you can set this as true as well. Okay. And I've mention, this is the GitHub where you can find the binaries, and this is an actively working CNCF graduated product. And if you have any issues, you can actually raise these as issues in here. And if you want to contribute, you can also contribute using the pull request over here. Okay. So let's go back to the demo and see where we are. Okay. Okay. So in the meantime, I would probably view through, explain how this K9s tool works. So currently I'm in the context of pods. And if I want to go back to the namespaces, you can do an escape and do a namespaces as well. So this K9 tools list down all the namespaces that it has, local kind cluster. It has created two namespaces here as part of this test. Okay. You can just go through one of these things and you can see, uh, you can do an enter, and you can see the list of containers that it has. You can see copy system configurations. These are init containers, and rest artifactory is the main container that we have. Okay. And you can escape, you can exit back using an escape key. Okay. And you can also do a describe of artifactory as well. So it's now trying to do a pull of the image. It might take few minutes around this. And you can go to the other test as well, where you can go, you can check these are access, artifactory event, or different microservices in artifactory. This is in a split mode. Okay. So we are running two tests. One is artifactory in a split mode and artifactory without a split mode. This is an open source version of artifactory, by the way. It might take few minutes to install based on your internet connection. And you can see the logging around. Kuttl provides a detailed documentation of how the test actually ran. And more importantly, Kuttl also provides a report whether the test has been successfully run. Using it uses two formats. One is a JSON format or an XML format. You can probably hook these up to your CI/CD systems, where it can give a final report: what all tests are passed, what all tests are successfully passed, and what are failed. I would show you at the end of the demo. Okay. Let's wait for a few more minutes while the test runs. Let's go back to see whether our tests are still running. You can see Artifactory is trying to start up. You can go to the L and you can see Artifactory is trying to start up on one of the tests, one of the namespaces. Let me. Okay, it's trying to start. You can see all the services have successfully started. Okay. Let's go back to the other. You can see once the test is successful, it is also, the Kuttl also terminates the namespaces. Okay. So it sets up the namespaces and also terminates the namespaces. You can see the other test. You can see it's trying to start up the other in the namespace. So you can check in the logs as well. One of the namespaces would have been deleted by now. You can see deleting a namespace since the test was successful. We would get the report at the end whether the both tests are successful or failed. You can see two of the four microservices are up. It's waiting for the other to be up. Yes, even this service is, even this Artifactory instance is up. You can go back to see it's also being terminated now. Okay. Now, Kuttl would, I assume both the tests are successful. Now, Kuttl would give a report saying what tests it has run and how many are successful. This gives, as I previously told, this can be hooked up into your CI to give a report what tests it successfully ran and what tests it did not run. So by using Kuttl, which is very equivalent to what you have in the remote end-to-end test environments, you can test all these tests locally. So you can see Kuttl has run. Kuttl has run these two tests. It has stayed down the cluster as well, local kind cluster, and two of the tests are pass as well. Okay, we are good. Now let's go back to the presentation. Okay, a quick summary. What we have learned today: Kuttl is an open source tool, graduated CNCF graduated tool. It can be used for local testing, and we have seen a quick demo of it as well. And with developers trying to test locally, which would mean few broken builds on a remote CI/CD server, which would also mean you can release faster, which would also mean happy developers. If you have any questions, you can probably reach out to me on LinkedIn. And that's all I have for today. Thanks for attending my session. Have a nice day.